He addressed the situation properly once the flight landed, ensuring that Karen's behavior was reported accurately and that management understood the seriousness of her actions. Meanwhile, other passengers whispered quietly to one another. They admired Marcus's calm and professionalism. Some commented that it was refreshing to see someone handle discrimination without anger, to use composure as a tool for justice rather than confrontation. Marcus, hearing the quiet acknowledgments in passing, felt a small sense of satisfaction, though he remained focused on the next steps. The flight attendants continued their routines, unaware that their colleagues' actions had already sparked a chain of events that would have serious consequences. Marcus reviewed his documents again, making mental notes for the meeting and for the follow-up he would have with the airline. He reflected on the subtle signs of bias he had seen, the hesitation in Karen's voice, the dismissive tone, and how important it was to remain calm under pressure. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard and informing them of a smooth flight ahead. Marcus leaned back slightly, letting the hum of the plane settle around him. He thought about the power of patience, composure, and authority. How sometimes, winning a conflict wasn't about confrontation, but about demonstrating professionalism and letting truth and facts speak for themselves. Part 1. Closes with Marcus settling fully into his first-class seat. His briefcase beside him, documents reviewed and mind-focused. The immediate tension was over, but he knew the next 6 minutes on the ground after landing would be decisive. He was ready to ensure that justice would be served in a professional, undeniable way. Marcus had taken his seat, but the story of accountability had just begun. The plane landed smoothly, and Marcus Allen remained seated, composed as ever, his mind already moving ahead. He knew what needed to be done. He had flown across the country many times, but this experience had taught him that even small acts of discrimination could leave deep marks. As the engine slowed and the passengers began to gather their belongings, Marcus calmly contacted his assistant with a brief message. He would handle the situation immediately upon leaving the aircraft. As the doors opened, flight attendants moved down the aisle, greeting passengers politely. Marcus gathered his briefcase, placed it neatly on his shoulder, and followed the flow of people toward the exit. His calm demeanor caught the attention of a few passengers. They exchanged surprised glances, recognizing the poise of a man accustomed to authority. Marcus did not seek attention. He only moved with purpose. At the gate, airline management was waiting, slightly anxious. Marcus was escorted to a private room where the regional operations manager, a man in his 40s, stood with a polite smile, masking the tension of the situation. Marcus entered, nodding respectfully but firmly. He placed his briefcase on the table and looked directly at the manager. "Thank you for meeting me," Marcus began calmly. "I want to discuss the incident on the flight. A first-class passenger, me, was denied my rightful seat by one of your attendants. She insisted that the seat was unavailable, even after I presented my boarding pass and identification. This is not acceptable." The manager listened carefully, his posture straight but uneasy. Marcus continued, detailing the exact interaction with precision, avoiding anger or exaggeration. He described the dismissive tone, the reluctance to follow the manifest, and the hesitation that suggested bias. "I want this handled immediately and properly," Marcus said firmly. "Such behavior cannot continue in your airline." The manager nodded slowly, clearly aware of the gravity. "I understand, Mr. Allen. I apologize for this situation. We take such matters seriously. We will address it immediately." Marcus's eyes were calm but unwavering. Immediate action is necessary. Policies exist to ensure fairness. Discrimination in any form cannot be tolerated, and proper standards must be enforced. The manager nodded again and made a brief phone call. Moments later, Karen, the flight attendant who had caused the problem, was summoned to the room. She entered, her face pale, her usual confidence gone. Marcus stood straight and composed and gestured politely for her to sit. Karen attempted to speak, stammering, "Mr. Allen, I think there was a misunderstanding." Marcus did not raise his voice. He spoke clearly, calmly, and firmly. "There was no misunderstanding on my part. I followed all proper procedures. You refused to allow me to occupy the seat I purchased in violation of your own policies. Your behavior was unprofessional and unacceptable." Karen's hands trembled slightly as she tried to find the right words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The manager stood silently, glancing at her and then at Marcus, waiting for the next steps. Marcus continued, maintaining his calm but decisive tone. I am certain that your actions were not only incorrect but discriminatory. Such behavior cannot continue in your workplace. Accountability must be immediate. Karen's shoulders slumped. She had expected to argue, to explain herself, but Marcus's confidence and authority left no room for excuses. She realized that her mistake had consequences she could not avoid. Marcus took a deep breath and stated clearly, "You are terminated from this airline effective immediately." For a moment, Karen froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. You can't do that," she said, her voice shaking. Marcus's tone remained calm and steady. "I can and I have. Your actions violated company policy and demonstrated discrimination. Accountability is necessary, and I will ensure this matter is fully documented." The regional operations manager intervened gently. "Ms. Karen, please understand that this decision is final. It reflects our commitment to professionalism and fairness. We will assist you with the transition, but your employment here is terminated." Karen's lips pressed tightly together. She realized there was no way to argue further. Her attempts to justify her behavior, to explain the hesitation or policy confusion, were no longer relevant. Marcus had used calm professionalism and authority to deliver a clear consequence for her actions. Meanwhile, airline staff outside the room were aware of the situation. They watched with quiet respect. A few whispered that Marcus had handled the situation with incredible poise. No yelling, no threats, just calm authority and clear enforcement of fairness. Marcus took a moment to document the incident personally on his phone, noting the time, the interaction, and the outcome. He wanted to ensure that every detail was recorded accurately. He then thanked the manager for their attention and left the room. His steps were measured, confident, and composed. As he walked toward the exit, passengers who had observed the incident earlier nodded or smiled subtly in recognition. Some had seen the video recording circulating on phones, quietly admiring how Marcus had managed the situation. It was not just about him regaining his seat. It was about holding someone accountable while remaining calm, professional, and composed. Marcus reflected on what had happened. He thought about his early career, the moments when discrimination had affected him subtly and overtly. He remembered times when he had been underestimated or dismissed because of the color of his skin. Today was different. Today he had the authority, the composure, and the opportunity to ensure that fairness was upheld. He realized that power combined with professionalism could make a difference. It could correct wrongs quickly, decisively, and fairly. The lesson was clear. Rising to a position of influence allowed him to act, not out of anger but out of principle. Passengers continued to board or disembark around him. Marcus moved calmly, greeting a few familiar faces with a nod or brief smile. He carried himself with quiet confidence, aware that the incident had already become a story among the passengers, and likely among airline management. Once outside, he contacted his assistant to confirm travel arrangements for the next leg of his journey. He reflected on the 6 minutes it had taken on the ground for the airline to enforce accountability. In that short time, a clear message had been sent. Discrimination and unprofessional behavior would not be tolerated, no matter the circumstances. Marcus's thoughts returned to the broader lesson. He understood that patience, observation, and composure were just as powerful as authority. By staying calm, sticking to the facts, and using his position responsibly, he had ensured that justice was served quickly and professionally. He had acted decisively not to humiliate, but to uphold fairness and respect in a professional setting. As Marcus entered the car waiting for him at the airport, he took a deep breath and allowed himself a small smile. Today had been challenging, but it had reinforced something important. Respect, professionalism, and calm authority could overcome even the most difficult obstacles. He felt satisfied, not just for himself, but for setting an example of accountability that would resonate far beyond this single flight. He settled into the car, briefcase on his lap, looking out at the busy airport. He thought about the flight, the confrontation, and the swift resolution. Marcus knew that this experience would be remembered not for the confrontation itself, but for the way he handled it, calmly, firmly, and decisively. The flight attendant who had caused the problem would face the consequences of her actions, and Marcus would continue with his day, assured that fairness had been upheld. He understood that in life, Situations of unfairness could arise at any time, but the response mattered far more than the problem itself. By remaining professional and calm, he had turned an unjust situation into a demonstration of leadership and authority. The car drove off, carrying Marcus toward his next destination. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, knowing he had addressed the incident effectively. In his mind, the lesson was clear. When faced with injustice, composure, preparation, and decisive action could change outcomes instantly. Today had proven that in a very real way, and Marcus Allen would carry that lesson forward, always.